Stalingrad, winter 1942. A place where entire divisions vanished without a sound. Soldiers said the city screamed at night, louder than the shelling. But one German unit went silent first. Their last message was a single word: contact. After that, nothing, no survivors, no bodies. This is the story, buried under rubble and snow, of the patrol that disappeared in Stalingrad. This is where their trail begins, in a city already crushed by months of shelling, its streets torn open, its sky black with smoke. For the German Sixth Army, Stalingrad had become a maze of death. Buildings no longer had floors, only holes where men fell through. Every sector was collapsing, reinforcements far too few. But Group 98 received orders: clear the northern ruins before dawn, a task no one wanted. This archive photo shows the Barmely Fountain, one of the few landmarks still recognizable in the carnage. Group 98 passed this square just hours before they vanished. At dusk they moved in silence. Every window, every cratered doorway, could hide a Soviet sniper waiting for a silhouette. Yet their orders were absolute: advance, hold the street, and report positions by midnight, a message headquarters would never receive. Night fell, and the ruins came alive. Gunfire echoed through empty buildings, each shot bouncing between shattered walls. These real photographs show German squads fighting, in nearly identical conditions, often unable to tell friend from foe in the dark. A Soviet tank erupted just blocks away. The blast shook the entire sector, and in the confusion, Group 98 made their final transmission: "We are engaging multiple positions." Then silence. What happened next remains unknown. Survivors from nearby units later said they heard gunshots, screams, and then nothing. It was as if the ruins swallowed them whole. German photos from the Volga front show similar attack formations, men spread along shallow trenches, believing artillery had cleared the way. In Stalingrad, it hadn't. The company tried to reorganize, forming small fire groups to push forward house by house. But every gain of 10 meters came at the cost of another squad, another friend. Pictures like this one, German soldiers stepping over ruins and charred beams, were never tied to a specific unit. They could easily have been the men of this company. Night fighting turned the ruins into tunnels of fire and shadow, where visibility ended at the next doorway. German machine gun teams dug in like this, using collapsed masonry for cover while Soviet units crept closer through smoke and dust. Patrols sent to find the flanks came back with the same answer: "We're alone out here." The company dug into shattered apartments and stairwells, turning every room into a firing position. Soviet storm groups attacked again and again, probing for weak points in the German line. This Soviet photograph shows exactly that kind of assault. Men climbing through rubble and narrow alleys to hit positions from the side or from above. Bayonet fighting and grenade duels became routine. The front line no longer existed. There were only pockets of men clinging to corners of buildings. In the ruins of Stalingrad, decisions were made at bayonet length, not in meetings, but in moments like this, where stepping back meant death and pushing forward meant only a chance. At this range there were no commands, only reflex and fear. German troops fired point blank to break the Soviet charge, knowing a moment's hesitation meant ending up on the ground themselves. On the Soviet side, blocking detachments stood behind the line, ready to shoot their own retreating soldiers rather than let the defense collapse. For the Germans, the sound of those gunshots in the rear made one thing clear: nobody on either side would be allowed to leave Stalingrad easily. Photos of NKVD troops supervising heavy machine guns remind us that some weapons in this battle were pointed not at the enemy but at their own frightened men. Under this pressure, the 98th Company began to fracture. Some squads held firm, others drifted backward, and small groups simply vanished in the smoke. By the time the firing briefly died down, their numbers were already cut in half, and no one knew exactly where the survivors were. Soviet images of infantry firing from behind industrial pipes show the kind of positions that might have crushed isolated German pockets with sudden, concentrated fire. At dawn, Soviet armor returned. Tanks nosed through the rubble, their tracks grinding over bodies and broken masonry. Archival photographs show German soldiers hugging the ground as explosions ripped through factory yards, moments when entire platoons could disappear in seconds. The company's remaining anti-tank gun fired until its crew was killed, then burned where it stood. Men ran ammunition by hand through collapsing corridors, tripping over debris they'd never seen in daylight. This Soviet photograph, with its twisted metal and low firing positions, could be a snapshot of the exact factory complex where the company was making its last stand. Survivors fell back into a secondary line, less a prepared defense and more a scatter of craters and half-destroyed rooms. Flames from burning tanks lit the sky, turning snow and dust orange. German photos show exhausted men like this, covered in soot, clutching captured weapons because their own ammunition was gone. By now, the 98th Company had lost contact with battalion headquarters altogether. Orders stopped coming. This image of close-quarters fighting captures what the company now faced. Combat at distances so short that grenades bounced off walls and landed among friend and foe alike. Some soldiers whispered about trying to break out at night, slipping through the ruins toward the river. Others argued that leaving their positions would only get them shot by their own side, accused of desertion. As darkness fell again, they could see only the glow of fires and the muzzle flashes of rifles. Archival photos from the industrial district show Soviet counterattacks like these, pushing forward across the same ground again and again until no defensive line remained. The men realized there was no safe direction to move. Forward meant Soviet guns. Backward meant chaos and accusations. Staying put meant slowly dying in place. Stalingrad's underground spaces, cellars, tunnels, drainage shafts became temporary refuges and just as often, graves. This photograph of a sheared-off apartment block shows how entire shelters could vanish in a single bombardment, burying everyone inside without a trace. Rumors spread that nearby German units had already been overrun, leaving the company as one of the last groups still holding this sector. They fired at shadows, never sure whether they were repelling an attack or wasting their last rounds on smoke. Soviet troops used interiors like this, stepping over rubble to shoot from windows and gaps where floors once stood. The few remaining officers tried to keep a record of casualties, but even their notes were soon smeared with mud, blood, and ash. At some point, the logbook simply stopped being updated. The battle was moving too fast. German photos of men huddled together behind a wall capture the same feeling. No clear plan, only survival from one hour to the next. When the final Soviet offensive rolled over this district, it did so like a storm cloud, artillery first, then infantry moving through the dust. German positions that had existed on maps for months vanished in a single morning. Here, Soviet troops pour through a street choked with debris, rifles raised. Scenes like this played out all across the sector the company had been ordered to hold. After the bombardment, there was no clear sign of where the 98th Company's lines had been. Search parties from other German units found only cratered avenues and collapsed entrances. Some survivors might have looked like this, faces blackened by smoke, uniforms in tatters, eyes empty from exhaustion. Whether they fell in place or tried to flee, the result was the same. The city swallowed their traces. Amid collapsing buildings and burning armor, scattered German units fought desperately to break out of the tightening Soviet ring. Every street became a kill zone where a single misstep meant being caught in the fire of Soviet artillery or the blast of an incoming shell. Some groups slipped into basements and service tunnels, trying to navigate the ruins unseen as the battlefield raged above them. Others held firing positions in the shadows, clinging to what little ground they still controlled as Soviet troops pressed in from all sides. As the battle turned decisively against the Germans, pockets of resistance across Stalingrad began to surrender. After the last shots faded, the ruins fell silent. Basements and tunnels, once hiding places for desperate men, now stood empty, their lanterns still burning beside abandoned gear. In the ruined basements beneath the city, Soviet search teams moved carefully, checking every corner for any last pockets of resistance. Above ground, the battlefield still smoldered silent now, except for the distant rumble of artillery marking the end of the city's final defenders. Photographs from those days show exhausted prisoners marching through the snow faces hollow, units indistinguishable, identities fading in the cold. In makeshift command posts, Soviet officers pieced together what they could: battle maps covered in notes, scattered reports, and the last known positions of shattered German formations. For the Germans who had fought here, the final moments were chaos smoke, close quarters fire, and a city collapsing around them. Those who survived the fighting joined the long columns of prisoners, leaving Stalingrad miles of footsteps disappearing into the white distance. In the end, The story of the 98th Company vanished in the same smoke that swallowed Stalingrad, its men scattered, lost, or carried away into captivity. By the time the guns fell silent, Stalingrad was scarcely a city, anymore just a burned skeleton along the river. The districts the 98th Company had once fought over were now indistinguishable from any other ruined block. The children's fountain still stood, ringed by destruction, a reminder that real lives and real people had been erased here. In the first silent hours after the fighting ended, Stalingrad burned under falling snow, its ruins glowing like the embers of a city that no longer existed. Helmets, rusted weapons, and fragments of uniforms sometimes surfaced in the dirt-mute evidence that somebody had once fought and died on that exact spot. In the firelit ruins of Stalingrad, the 98th Company vanished, leaving behind no names, no records, only silence and a helmet in the snow. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Your support helps us continue uncovering forgotten chapters of history.